Welcome back, everybody, to the Off Base Sports Podcast. As always, I am your host, Jason Benicki-Critchlow, and you can find me on YouTube, Instagram, Snapchat, and Twitter at JASONBANICKI. You can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Google Play Music, Amazon, Castbox, Satchel, Stitcher, and Spotify. We're also on TuneIn Radio, and a few other things I'm sure I don't even know we're on. Please subscribe, rate, review, share with your friends. Let's grow the audience. You can also find Off Base Sports on Twitter at Off Base Sports 1. You can find us on Instagram at Off Base Sports, although I've been neglecting that a little, so I need to post something after my most recent Fitzmagic post last week. And also we have the Facebook page, Off Base Sports. Give it a like, and let's carry these conversations on beyond me just talking in your earpiece. As always, I thoroughly enjoy talking sports, and that's why I do this. And it would be hard-pressed for me to want to start this week without starting with the most important event in sports this weekend, and that, of course, is Tiger winning at the Players' Championship. I don't know about the rest of you, but I was pretty riveted to my phone on Sunday because I had to work. So I was bouncing back and forth between a computer screen, between my phone, and then once we got down to hole 17, I went and took one of my breaks and watched it live on NBC. Kind of the most interesting thing has been watching all of the videos of Tiger, watching all the people who told him he was never going to win again, and that he just couldn't do it anymore, that he'd never really... You had Jamel Hill telling him his next press release should be, "I retire." And then you're going to hear a lot of these same voices, Colin Cowherd and guys like Skip Bayless, just Woody Page, laud praise on this man. Like they expected it all along. Like they were in for the ride. No. If you've listened to this podcast for any kind of length of time, I've been in on the Tiger comeback all year. But again, I never went anywhere on Tiger Woods, and I don't feel like the most of fans went anywhere. I think it got to be part of that just hot take culture where everybody had to say Tiger Woods was finished. And I mean, and some of it was well-founded. I mean, you haven't seen a guy come back from a major back injury like this, let alone 4 back surgeries to win, one of the most exclusive fields on the PGA Tour. So as for some of those voices that were even just earlier this year, well, he might win another tournament after they've seen him play well, but he'll never win another major. Those fields are too stacked and there's too many good golfers. He just won against the 30 best golfers in the world. I think he's proven that when his game is right, he's still good. He's 42 years old. He's going to be 43. It's not like he's about to go on a magic run again. I'm not delusional, and if I never see another major, I'm okay with that. As I've said before, there is something about the presence of Tiger when he's competitive on a golf course that is always going to make me tune in that nobody else can do. Will I tune in and watch the last 3 or 4 holes of a major no matter who's winning? Yeah, I'm always going to be that guy. But there's just something different when Tiger's playing well. I have to check the scoreboard throughout all 4 rounds. I have to tune in as often as I can to watch live. I'm on my phone streaming it. I'm on a computer streaming it. I'm trying to get as much data as quickly as possible as I can, so that way I'm not having any issues, not missing out. That FOMO, that fear of missing out. Justin Thomas doesn't do that to me. Justin Rose doesn't do that to me. Brian DeChambeau doesn't do that to me. Dustin Johnson doesn't get me excited. But Tiger Woods, there was always a fear of missing out with Tiger Woods. And it's, again, you saw something very different when he was coming down the 18th green. I've seen it before, big galleries for him, but it as kind of everybody hit the nail on the head, it felt different, it looked different, it sounded different. And I think it was something that so many of us weren't sure we would ever see again. It's been 5 years, over 5 years since we've last seen it. So, I'd never wavered, and I never lost my support, not through hookups with Denny's waitresses or Shoney's waitresses or IHOP waitresses or whatever they happen to be. not through back surgeries, not through DUI due to pain pills and everything else and sleeping pills and all of that. And I never wavered in my support of Tiger because I knew he was not just a generational player. And I've stated before that I hate this talk of comparing eras and who's the greatest of all time kind of concept. But in my eyes, because I got to see him, and I didn't get to see Jack Nicklaus play or Sam Snead or any of these guys, that he was easily the greatest golfer of all time. And we got to see some of why again yesterday, because there had long been this long-held myth over the last several years, 5-6 years particularly, where he wasn't winning as much, where he wasn't the same Tiger, where he just wasn't that same guy. Some of the myth became that, these older guys who grew up with Tiger when he was in his 20s and his 30s and he was in his prime and he was just mowing people down, of course they felt the Tiger effect. And they would, when playing with him on Sunday or when he was slightly ahead of them on Sunday, they would be afraid that, they would start to wilt under the pressure. And they, these new kids, though, these kids who grew up watching him, they're not afraid of him. They've played, not had to stare him down, and they've not seen that dominant Tiger force. Yet we've seen the two guys chasing Tiger Woods yesterday just absolutely fall all over themselves. He went in with a 3-shot lead, and by hole 9 had a 5-shot lead, and then just coasted his way through to the finish. So not to be one of those things where I think, we got to disprove that the Tiger effect was anything more than the Tiger effect. So, guess what? The Tiger effect is real. It's back. It's powerful. And it does affect these younger kids. If you don't think Rory McIlroy got eaten up by those galleries, by the fact that Tiger Woods was chasing him down, I can't have a decent discussion with you about sports because you just don't know sports. So, unfortunately, I don't know what to tell you there. And I'm going to apologize if there's any static in my audio. Our levels are way high today, and I don't know why. So hopefully that's something that doesn't come through or gets fixed in post. So I don't want to focus on that too much, but I just want to say that it was, I've been a champion of Tiger all year, and his comeback, particularly post Valspar when we saw him compete, post the British when he was close, post the PGA championship when he was even closer at a course that people didn't think set up as well for him as the British, because there was all that myth. Well, the British might be his last chance to win because this is the one that he set up the most for, and then all of a sudden it didn't. Okay, so there's going to be a little break in this episode, and I apologize for that if the audio gets a little incongruous or my thought process gets a little incongruous because of that. But I was hearing something in my headphones, and I just had to double check and make sure it wasn't recording. It was just that the headphones themselves, because the last thing I want you to do is hear awful audio. But what I was going on about was, all the pundits that were talking about Tiger Woods' British Open being kind of his last chance for a major, and then when that didn't work out, they all figured his window had closed. Yet then he comes out right at the very next tournament, next major, not the next tournament, sorry, the PGA Championship, and goes into a solo second place. And all of a sudden, now all these guys are back on the bandwagon. It's just like, I'm tired of everybody feeling like they have to have an answer the minute something happens, instead of sitting back and analyzing what happened and saying, okay, what did we see? What can we learn from it? And what can we possibly extrapolate about it going forward and put into context going backwards? And Tiger turned out over the last couple years to be the perfect example of what sports, sports radio, sports television, even sports podcasting has become, where everybody has to have this latest, greatest, hottest take. And they all have to have it yesterday, and they have to beat the punch. And that's why I waited till Monday morning to record this episode as opposed to Sunday. I wanted to give myself some time to process, watching Tiger win, and not just let it be all about my thoughts and my emotions and how much I enjoyed getting to watch Tiger, and how nervous I got as he started losing, as he had a bogey, and then he had another bogey, and now it's down to 2 shots with 2 holes to go. And then he flies that third shot or second shot on the par 4 17th, and then he hits just that amazing chip, so then he can tap it in. I wouldn't call it a tapping, I guess. But hit a nice little putt to save his par and go into 18 on a par 5 up to, at that point, you were in pretty, you knew he was in pretty good shape. Because even if he did what he did, which was hit the second shot in the sand, then he gets it on the green, he still has 3 putts for the win at that point. So, you were in a comfortable position. But, it got to be a little nerve-wracking. I got to be pretty excited. You're watching the galleries. And it was a spectacle to behold. And even Tiger admitted it was a little different now than it was before, because a lot of us didn't know for sure we'd ever see this again. Like I said, I was pretty sure it would happen, but you start to wonder after you haven't seen it a while. And like Jack Nicklaus said, he never doubted that Tiger would win again, but he knew that Tiger had to learn to win again because it had been so long. And now that I think that he's learned to win again, and he, not just won this tournament, he didn't come out and eke it out. He didn't, put together one great round and run away with this tournament. He led wire to wire. He led at the end of the first round, and tied for the lead at the end of the first round, tied for the lead at the end of the second round, sole lead at the end of the third, and sole winner of the tournament, because you can only have one winner. This isn't soccer or the NFL this year, where there seems to be ties all the time. So it was great to see that it wasn't just like one great round with, a couple of mediocre ones and then holding on for dear life. I mean, the last round was what Tiger did in his prime. He would go out, he would put the ball in the fairway, put it on the green, make birdies, make an occasional birdie, but mostly make pars, and make you come up to him. And, back then, guys wilted away. And then you had this thought process for a while that, again, and I touched on this earlier, but you had this thought process that these younger kids would not be intimidated or wouldn't feel that Tiger effect. And guess what? If they did, it's real. He's back. I'm not booking him to win the Masters because I've talked before. They worked so hard to Tiger-proof Augusta that they've kind of made it a hard course for right-handers in general to win, let alone a guy like Tiger. But I wouldn't count him out either. He's at 80. He needs to win 3 more to be the all-time winningest PGA, have the most PGA wins total. And so again, I was kind of touching on that. I hate to have those greatest of all times, but in my eyes, nothing against Jack Nicklaus or Sam Snead or any of these other guys that are in that discussion. They have not done what Tiger Woods has done on a golf course. They never did for the game of golf what Tiger Woods has done for the game of golf. And I think sometimes that gets lost in who's the greatest of all time discussions in any sport. Is not only what did you do on the field, but what did you do for your sport off of it? Did you make it a more marketable sport? Did you make it grow to the masses? Was your impact tangible in a box office, on TV ratings, in the pockets of other players? Because make no mistake about this, Michael Jordan made every basketball player more money, whether it was through different kinds of shoe deals or ultimately bringing more eyeballs to the NBA and getting more ratings and selling more tickets and just raising the amount of revenue that came into the sport. And the same can be said for Tiger Woods. He changed the way that golf endorsement deals were structured. He was able to again, clearly bring in more spectators to a tournament than you normally would have. He definitely brought in more viewers. I don't know what the overnight ratings were for round 4, but let me look that up real quick, so give me just a second. There's no doubt that the ratings were up for round 4 of the Players' Championship. And, the question is it double? Is it triple? Is it, what kind of impact does he have? So 19.3 million viewers, according to Zap It. They had up 62% from last year. 62%. That's the difference between Tiger Woods being there or not. We're not talking a small bump. We're not talking a little up. 62%. Now, that's tangible in dollars to every player on the tour. And that's important because that's the kind of thing that builds a legacy out there. Not that Jack Nicklaus didn't lay a foundation the same way that Bird and Magic laid a foundation for Michael Jordan. But being able to be that transcendent star who crosses over is something that has to be accounted for when you say who had the biggest impact, who is the greatest of all time in a sport. I think that's part of that discussion, and I think it gets overlooked all the time. And again, I said I hate to talk it, but it's great when I get to see somebody like Tiger, who, in my opinion, is the greatest golfer. Doesn't matter if he ever gets to 18 majors. I know in golf, the majors are similar to tennis, where it's, well, these are the big ones. These are the ones you have to win. If you win the most tournaments ever, that's an important accomplishment too. And again, just the level of dominance Tiger exhibited. He went through a lot over these last 10 years that have absolutely diminished what his ultimate impact could and should have been when he started going through the divorce with Ellen and had to go to sex. Because again, we projected our morality onto Tiger Woods. We wanted him to be what we wanted him to be. Who cares what we want him to be off the course or on the course? Ultimately, he's the one who has to live that life, and he's the one who has to pay those prices. And he's the one who should get to make those decisions. And unfortunately, we robbed him of some peak years by shaming him for being Tiger Woods and for living his life the way he saw fit. And unfortunately, that's just always going to be one of those things that we'll never get back. And I feel like we robbed ourselves more than we robbed him, because it seems like he's grown as a person, and you know, being a parent changes everybody. And he seemed to appreciate this win more, and he seemed to be more interactive with the fans, and that's all great. But you know, if we would have let him be him, what could have been? It's kind of crazy to talk about somebody in the discussion where they're at the greatest and still think what ifs. You usually save your what ifs for people who don't reach those heights and reach those levels. So that's kind of my point. At the end of the day, if you have a what if with somebody who's at the level he's at, then that's your argument right there. I don't want to talk all about Tiger Woods in this episode, particularly since it's just me. I do have two other main topics I want to talk about, but I'm going to use a short topic as a transition from golf into what's going to be pretty much football the rest of the way. But I did want to touch on, we're entering the last full week of the baseball season. We've got, you know, just a handful more games to go. 7, 8, depending on, somewhere between 6 and 8, depending on your team. And normally, I've not been a big fan of the second wild card. I'm still really not, by the way. I don't think that again, the solution to the problems that the wild card created was not to add another wild card. That's like saying, hey, you got shot. How about we shoot you again? That should fix that. Like, it didn't fix the problems with division races. And luckily, we have a couple of really good division races going on. In the American League West, Houston was supposed to run away and hide with that. Seattle was supposed to be the main contender. And the magic number for Houston is only 3 over Oakland. So, odds are they're going to win the West. But that was way closer than it should have been. And at times down the stretch, Oakland managed to pull off and lead that division for a day or two when they had some head-to-heads. Unfortunately, because I'm sure, I haven't looked at the schedule, but I'm sure because of the way Oakland was projected, they're not playing Houston down this last week. So unfortunately, we won't get to see that. But Oakland's magic number to take the second wild card spot is 1 game. Boston's one game away from having the best record in baseball. You have the Cubs in the Central with a 2.5 game lead, so their magic number's 5. You have the Dodgers with a game and a half in the West, so their magic number's 6. Milwaukee's magic number is 4 for the first wild card, and St. Louis is 6 for the second. They have a game and a half cushion on Colorado, just the same as the Dodgers. So really, it looks like there's going to be 3 NL Central teams to make the playoffs. It looks like there's going to be 2 AL East, 2 AL West. The AL Central was a dumpster fire, and then the Indians ran away with it, and the rest of the division was just garbage. In the American League East, you have the Braves, who were kind of ahead of schedule. I don't think, but it does kind of teach us an important lesson. As a Cubs fan, I easily have my issues and qualms with Dusty Baker as a manager, but I think the Cubs learned after he left. I think San Francisco learned after he left, and I think the Nationals learned after he left. He may not be the greatest postseason manager baseball's ever seen. He might be one of the worst. But the fact that he could consistently get teams to the postseason should be a fact that people recognize and celebrate more. And the Nationals got rid of him, and now they're going to miss the playoffs. Now they've had injuries and other things come along, but I think sometimes when you have a manager as experienced as Dusty Baker, sometimes it makes it easier to ride out those storms. But that's not what I wanted to talk about. I just wanted to talk about how much everybody at home should be enjoying this last full week of the regular season, because there are so much to be decided yet, that there's still so many opportunities for meaningful games to be played, and that's not necessarily been the case over the last few years, where there's been issues with some of the divisions and the wild cards being so out of hand, and that the second wild card really may have stopped wild card teams from winning World Series, for a couple years now. But I think that's more to do with how good some of the World Series winners have been and how good the division winners have been. I don't think it's always been a matter of, hey, that one game wild card makes it really hard for you to line yourself up and get into the playoffs and get into the World Series. Although, were the Royals a wild card team? Now I'm trying to think. I think they were, weren't they? One year they went to the World Series. So I don't know, because I thought they beat Oakland in the play-in game, the year that Oakland went all in and traded for John Lester and Jeff Samardzija and all of that, where they kind of made a full go move. And of course, everybody at that time was questioning Billy being in, because he was doing the opposite of what he normally did, which he was acquiring pieces and trading some of his farm system. And they thought, well, Oakland doesn't have the budget to sustain this. How are they going to be competitive in the near term? And they had a couple bad years after that, but lo and behold, they're right back up there. Anybody who ever questions what Billy Beane does and how good Billy Beane is should look at themselves in the mirror, because unfortunately they all just keep thinking of Moneyball and on-base percentage, and the book and the movie don't do enough justice to what he does best, which is draft and develop pitching. At the end of the day, that's why they've been so consistently in the game. He was just able to look at offense differently and how to support his pitching staff initially. And now that everybody else has adapted onto that, he's still finding ways to find value players within that. And sometimes it's just by trading his guys 2 or 3 years early instead of waiting to the last year, so he can get more pieces back that are more cost controlled. So take some time this week, watch some baseball, tune into some of the key games, and enjoy some real division races, and even a little bit of the battle for the wild card in the NL. It should be fun. We should enjoy it. We should, as sports fans, it's everything we should hope for, where we in theory have 3 divisions up for grabs and 1 wild card spot. We have 4 meaningful races going on down the last week of the season. 3 meaningful. I'm not throwing the wild card in there. I'm going to throw my personal bias and say there's only 3 meaningful races. But unfortunately, the downside to that is in all 3 of those cases, 2 out of the 3, I would say in the NL West, whoever loses probably won't get the second wild card unless the Cardinals just have a terrible week. So whoever loses that is probably out. Unfortunately for the Cubs and the Astros, if somehow they sputter down the stretch this last week, they're still going to make the wild card spots. So that's always been my argument against the wild card, is that it's just not a strong, it gives you a fail safe instead of amping up division races. And I know they want to say, well, yeah, but now you have a 1-game plan and you have to adjust your rotation and it's a win or go home situation. But to me, it's still not the same. You still made the postseason. You still, had that fallback position. So like I said, that was just going to be a short transition, and hopefully it wasn't too terribly long. And then I wanted to spend the rest of the episode talking football. So I'm going to start with talking about Notre Dame making their quarterback change Saturday. It seems like there's some talk that there was some injury concern with Brandon Wimbush now that led to Ian Book getting the start, as opposed to just a decision by the coaching staff, although that goes back and forth, that they were making a change anyways, that they just didn't play Wimbush because he was a little nicked up, and then when the game was out of hand, that they let Jurkovich play so he could get some experience, and that they didn't risk further injuring Wimbush as they come up to a couple of games where, again, they will need him. I don't know if I posted much about this on any of the pages, and I know I haven't really talked about it on the podcast per se, other than against maybe when Todd was here when we played Michigan. But I like Ian Book, and I like what he brings to the table. It is very different than Brandon Wimbush. But I hope what doesn't become the case is that then now everybody looks at Ian Book as the guy and just say, well, Brandon Wimbush needs to go out, be a receiver or a running back or something like that. Because I think what he brings to the table as a quarterback, even as just a change of pace guy, is something that you can't account for. And that it's, as a quarterback, his ability to run the ball is different than it would be as a running back. And it's definitely different than it would be as a wide receiver. So kind of what I'm hoping for is that, you know, as we go against teams like Stanford and Florida State and USC, you know, despite some of their up and down play, these are marquee programs that have big time recruits, that they still continue to play both guys. I think both give you a different set of skills. I think, don't get me wrong, Ian Book can run, and he had proof of that by having 42 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns on Saturday. But his skill set ultimately leads himself to being more of a passer. He is much more accurate of a thrower than Brandon Wimbush, and it showed in how much better the offense clicked. I know Brian Kelly wants to say, well, the receivers weren't quite ready, and you know, it took them some time to develop some confidence for us to make this the right time to play Ian Book more, and you know, we had to have the people around him. I think that's trying a little chicken in the egg. You know, you're trying to say, well, we had to do this first as opposed to this. But sometimes it's hard for those guys to develop, show what they're capable of when they don't have a quarterback that can hit them in rhythm. One of the big plays was like a 55-yard screen pass that there's a 50-50 chance Wimbush doesn't complete, or if he does complete it, it's thrown so off point that it's hard to catch and hard to take advantage of the blocks in the space that screen passes allow. But there's no doubt that Wimbush is the most dynamic runner, and you have to account for him as a runner. I don't think he's good in what Brian Kelly is like to dub the blue zone, that 5 yards in where they used Ian Book primarily before Saturday. But he's really good if you use him at, say, about the 40 to the 40 zone, where he's got a really strong arm. Even if it's inaccurate, you have to account for him so much as a runner. You're typically going to have safeties cheat up. And then when you have this large arm that he has, you can sneak up and, you know, heave some deep bombs that not necessarily are you going to notice, or, you know, that you can sneak over the top that maybe Ian Book doesn't, because they're going to count on Ian Book to be able to throw the ball. So they're going to keep that safety back, which again then opens up more running lanes, as you saw by the improvement in the ground game in a 1 game span. When you have such drastic changes in a 1 game span, it's not hard to say what the cause and effect was, because there was a lot of talk leading up to this game about the need for, you know, possible changes in the offensive line, or maybe not having Harry Highstead, you know, would change the scheme, and that would be a problem. But instead, what you saw is once you had a quarterback that made people fear, running lanes opened up, because they weren't cheating an 8th man into the box, and their safeties weren't playing tighter to the line, because now they knew there was a guy who could beat them with his arm. He could also beat them with the legs, but you're willing to live with that more. Plus, again, it just made more room for the running backs. So I was glad to see it. I was glad to see them put up more points on Saturday than they had in any 2 games combined this year. It was fun as a fan to watch. It's going to be fun to watch this team play the rest of the year. The defense was a little shaky at times, and the offense sputtered a little bit to start the game. I don't want to let people gloss over that. Now, once they got their rhythm and they got going, then they just took off, pedal to the metal, which is something we hadn't seen this year. Is they had started really strong and then sputtered down. As the defense was able to see what the offense was doing, they adjusted really, really well and kind of shut the offense down from there. This week, it kind of went the opposite. Once the offense saw what the defense was doing for Notre Dame, the offense just went pedal to the metal. But ultimately, I think their chance to be the best team they could be going forward this year is to have some sort of timeshare with both quarterbacks. Again, you know, when you need to run a quarterback draw or a read option play, there are going to be things that Wimbush can do that Ian Book can't in the open field. He's just a much more dynamic athlete. However, when you want to run pass option plays, Ian Book gives you that option to both run, but he also gives you a much more accurate passer. And then when you're just talking pure passing and wanting to open the offense up, which I think anybody who's seen, Chip Long's offenses knows that he wants to open them up, and he's been having to change what he does. And that's been one of the strengths that I don't think Brian Kelly has gotten enough credit for in his time at Notre Dame, which is always one of those things. You get Notre Dame fans after a while who want to fire their head coach because he hasn't won a national championship. Well, it's a different era, and it's harder to compete, particularly if you're not one of the schools in the South or one of these big name programs that could admit guys that, say, Notre Dame or Michigan or Stanford can't get in to their school because they ultimately worry about the school just as much as the football program in that decision. They don't want kids in there that cannot succeed at the school. But he's adapted to whatever talent he's had around him. Ideally, yes, he wants mobile athletic quarterbacks, but he's played with guys like Tommy Reese. He tried to play some Dane Christ, although that didn't work out very well. Then he's played guys like Deshaun Kaiser, and he's tried to work in Malik Zaires. He's ran Brandon Wimbush, who is a very struggle passer, to say the least. So it's one of those things. He's not getting enough credit for adapting to the players around him, as opposed to saying, well, this is my system in a Chip Kelly way, and you have to fit my system. This isn't a discussion issue. You either fit or you don't. We're just that's the way it's gonna be. So it's exciting as a fan to see a dynamic offense on display. It's also kind of a caution to remember that the Wake Forest defense isn't some of the defenses they had played before. So that opened up some opportunities to make him look a little better. And a couple of the defenses coming up are a little better. Although, by and large, down the stretch, Notre Dame doesn't play another top 50 ranked defense. We're 4 games into the season, so there's still a little room for fluctuation in that. But you're also a third of the way into the college season now, so you kind of have an idea that there are no super powerful defenses that lie ahead. And I think that's, again, where the advantage of being able to play 2 quarterbacks will shine through the most, is that if one's struggling, the other can go in and tag in, and you're not going to see a big dip up. You're going to see a very different offense depending on who the quarterback is, but you're not necessarily going to see a diminished capability to lead winning drives and win football games. And that's kind of what you want as a college coach in either a 2 quarterback system, which all 3, the top 3 teams in the country, Alabama, Georgia, and Clemson, all have quarterback shares, 2 quarterback setups right now. So it's not out of the realm of possibility to play 2 quarterbacks and be playing in that +1 system for college football. I'm not calling it a playoff because it's not a playoff, not even close to a playoff. 4 teams is not a playoff. 4 teams is a +1 setup. That's what it is. So it's going to be, maybe if you went 8 teams at least, where you have the major 5 plus 3 at-larges, or my much more proposed 12 teams, all 10 conference champions plus 2 at-large teams, then I would call that a playoff. But right now it is not. It is just a +1 system that has led to non-conference champions winning the national championship, which was one of the things that this was supposed to help combat. But again, unfortunately, in the case of college football, they skewed towards Alabama every time. The system has been skewed by, well, they've been the best team. How do you know? They don't really play anybody. Again, LSU beat Alabama one year and then had to turn around after winning the SEC championship and replay Alabama, even though Alabama played not a single another snap of football, and then lost the national championship because, in my eyes, LSU was a national champion that year. Take one off the board for Alabama. Same for last year. They didn't win the SEC. I'm tired. Again, don't call it a playoff if you're going to put 2 teams from one conference in on a 4-team system, particularly when it's just all based off of, well, we have guys who watch the game. These guys do not watch every game. Again, yes, did Alabama win on the field when it mattered most? Yes. Should they have had those opportunities? No. But that's not what I'm talking about right now. What I'm talking about is the fact that if Notre Dame plays 2 quarterbacks, it's not the same kind of death sentence it used to be before. Sometimes you have a guy who you can use those 2 skill sets to make your offense even more dynamic. And going from something that I was excited to see and it was fun to watch to something that has been beat up time and time and time again on every sports talk show and on every TV show and on every podcast. But I'm going to rehash it anyways because it was just Thursday night football in the NFL. I can't find a single positive to say about it other than like the season kickoff and the Thanksgiving games. Those are the only 2 times I need football on Thursdays. You know why? Because of the Thursday kickoff game, everybody's well rested. Trust me, they didn't play any of those guys that were starting on that Thursday game in the last preseason game to give them some extra rest. And then the Thanksgiving games are the Thanksgiving games, and that's what we all want to tune in and watch Thanksgiving football. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. It's great to watch. It's more compelling. But above and beyond just the normal bad football that Thursday football is. And if you want to find out more about why Thursday football is so rough, Pat McAfee on the Pat McAfee Show 2.0 just did a episode last week or maybe 2 weeks ago. My time frames all run together with Joe Thomas, and he's talking about this very thing, and he talks about how Thursdays is kind of that end recovery day. It's kind of the first day where you're able to walk. So these guys really are just getting out of being in multiple car crashes Sunday, and now they're just barely up and moving, and it's like, now we want to play football. And while I'm sure that last Thursday's game turned in a better rating than it probably should have, because lo and behold, the Browns won their first game in 2 years, who on earth schedules the Browns versus the Jets? It still was not compelling football. It was 2 garbage teams. I understand every team has to play a Thursday night game, because you're trying to limit the number of repeat Thursday night players, because you already have 17 weeks of games with Thursdays now, because you added extras to it instead of, of just the end of the season like it was before, plus the Thanksgiving games where you already have Detroit and Dallas locked into those games. So you have this problem where you have to play everybody on Thursday at some point. But the biggest issue surrounding that is, who on earth schedules Cleveland versus the Jets for that? Like, nobody wants to tune in and watch Thursday night football, but we have to because of our fantasy lineups and because it's football, although the ratings are pretty soft. And this is one of those things where, the president and the, all lives matter people want to talk about the ratings being down in football, and they want to contribute to anthem protests or, anything like that. And the reality is that it's easy to say those things and point that way and say, okay, yeah, it was the anthem protest, and see, the ratings have gone up. But is it? Or is it the same thing that's happening in all of TV where ratings are down? And not just in all of TV, but even in sports. We're starting to get inundated with more and more options, and we're starting to hit market saturation. Again, we used to have 3 games on Sunday, 2 1 o'clocks and a 4 o'clock, or 1 o'clock and 2 4 o'clocks. Depending on your local market, you had 3 games between CBS and Fox. And then you had Monday Night Football. Great. Then all of a sudden, when did Sunday Night Football start? See, now I'm having to look this up. I hate to do this to you, because it turns into really bad airtime. But 2006, they had Sunday Night Football. So now we add a 5th game that everybody can watch. Not talking about DirecTV packages and streaming and all that's brought to the table too, in terms of being able to watch even more games. And then you add in Thursday night, initially just for the back half of the season, and now you've made it all season. So, at some point it gets to be, there's just so much football. I don't need to watch it all. It's taking up too much time. It's what we face with every bit of content we have out there now. Not only do you have, then you can watch it on Twitter as well, because there were Thursday night games on Twitter for a while, so that's not going to hit the Nielsen rating. And there's just all kinds of things that contributed to this, but ultimately, my point being is we've saturated the market. The Thursday night games are heart garbage, so most people don't want to waste their time watching them. We've started putting so much of this on cable that it's even harder for people to watch them, especially in a era when people are cord cutting, so there's not this availability. And as much as I would love to see Thursday night football go away, it makes too much money for the NFL. Amazon just bought the rights to Thursday night games, and voila, more money, and it's turning into a very short-term cash grab at the long-term expense of the health of the sport. Because you're going to get those much larger rights fees when you can go to the networks and say, look at how great our ratings are. Now, you could say overall viewership is probably up, even though, overnight ratings for individual games are down. Probably overall viewership across all platforms and all media is probably still up for football. It's highly unlikely that, given the increasing population and the globalization of sports, that overall viewership is down. But you again are trending towards a market saturation where people are just like, I get it. It's football, and I should want to tune in, but not for the Jets versus the Browns on a Thursday night. I've got to be, if you're on the East Coast, you're talking about a game that ends at 11:30 if you're lucky. And then for it to be the goddamn Jets versus the fucking Cleveland Browns, I don't think anybody's losing any sleep over missing that game. I get it. Cleveland won put up their first win since Donald Trump has been president. Let's make no mistake, that is their first win since Donald Trump has been president. They are now 1/2 game behind the division lead in the AFC Central. Why do I want to say NFC Central? Because I'm having a moment right now, apparently. But anyways, nobody was tuning in extra for that. If you weren't a Jets or a Browns fan, you didn't care. You weren't going out of your way to see that. And you're not going to pay extra for cable to watch those Thursday night games. I don't care. If your team plays one Thursday night game a year, you're going to be like, well, I'll either go to the sports bar or I'll miss it. That's the reality. Or I'll find a way to stream it. And that's just what we're seeing. That's what's happening. That's the reality of what's going on. And I might be wrong. Maybe there's some of you out there who love Thursday night football and like, I needed more football in my life. Having college football on Thursday wasn't the same as having NFL football on Thursday. By the way, now people hardly ever talk about the college Thursday night games because there's an NFL game on. Even if it's a terrible NFL game versus a decent college game on Thursday, because if you're playing on college on Thursday, either some of these schools play like every Thursday because it helps them get better viewership, or at least you played Saturday, so you've had an extra day of rest. Now you're talking, what would be the equivalent of playing a Friday night game in the NFL, which the NFL better never do against high school football, or I'll be done with the NFL at that point. If you try to ever take on Friday nights versus high school football, I'm out. And they really just don't need to add any more midweek games. Like I think there will always be a natural inclination for business owners to try and find a way to maximize all the revenue in the short term, no matter what it does to long-term profitability and long-term sustainability of the product. They just don't care. But I think I, for one, would not be sad if Thursday night football went away. So I think that's going to be it for this week. So thank you for tuning in to the Off Base Sports podcast. I know I haven't done any writing since my first one on the Off Base Sports blog on Blogspot, but I'll try and get back to that this week. Work's been kind of crazy, and plus when I'm not working, like today, I'll get done, I'll edit this, I'll post it, then I've got to go babysit my nephew, so that'll take up some of my time, but I want to get back to that as well. I really did do that with the best of intentions, and I'll get some stuff written here shortly. But thanks again for tuning in. This is the Off Base Sports podcast. So subscribe, rate, review, and share it with your friends and families, neighbors, people you don't like, even if, let's get it out there. Let's have a big discussion around sports every week. Let's make this part of our big discussion around sports, that maybe even though I joked around and put on my header when I changed it, you're home for hot sports takes and rants, or hot takes and sports rants. I don't think anybody who's listened to me gets much hot takes per se. I mean, you get rants. I'm full of rants, particularly when I have headlines to rant about. As obviously not being supported by Todd this week because I had to work yesterday, and then by the time I got off, he's getting ready to go to bed for work himself. But so subscribe, rate, review, share with your friends on iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, Castbox, Satchel, Podbean, Spotify, Amazon Music, pretty much anywhere you find podcasts outside of SoundCloud. I'm not paying SoundCloud extra money to host my podcast that I already pay somebody else to host. Doesn't make any goddamn sense. Sorry, it just doesn't. So add us on Off Base Sports 1 at Twitter, Off Base Sports on Instagram. You can add me on Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, and YouTube, where I also post the podcast at JASONBANICKI. Until next week, see ya.